What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Claudia Bellafato holding it down at the DraftKings studio in Boston. We got a great show for everybody. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave it a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, all those great places here. We got a fun one coming up today. Apparently, the Dallas Mavericks brought their ass and didn't work out too well for the Minnesota Timberwolves. But, Claudia, what else do we have coming up today?
Ask and you shall receive. They brought that ass. So, chief concerns, Mahomes and Reid speak on offseason drama. A lot of it. We'll dive into it. Domonique Foxworth will join us in hour 2 to talk some NFL. And snack time. I'm excited for this one. GoJo ranks his recent snacks. We get to hear the moans and see the eye rolls. Always fun for that one. But you mentioned the Mavs.
Just palpable disgust.
It's true.
Like
every time,
else.
GoJo, every time I see that video clip, I turn my volume down if I'm in public because I'm like, people are going to think that it's going to be the Mavs presser up in here with the way that you react to these sweet treats, sir.
I didn't realize that the sex noises and eye rolls that I made were so provocative until yesterday, as I, continue to make this weird life on my internet for myself of reviewing candy and treats in a car, where I got so many screenshots of my eyes rolling in my head, and I was like, chill. This is I need to put on this soon.
It's been interesting with you doing. I'm always amazed when you do it. When you do that review, that you put a whole cookie in your mouth. Normally when you eat on air or going to do something, you take a smaller bite so you can talk right away. But not you. And listen, I'm not judging. I'm proud of you. You do what most Golics do, or all Golics, I should say. Put the whole damn cookie in your mouth, chew, let your emotions be heard, and then make your review. So I'm proud of you. It's just not normally what happens with people who eat on air.
Emotions were heard. That's for sure. We will get into it. We actually have a whole segment dedicated to it. So if you missed the video, don't you worry. Grandma McFlurry is coming. We do have to talk hoops, though, because you mentioned it. The Mavs showed up with the 108-105 game win last night over Minnesota. Kyrie, Luka, it was their show. They scored 88 of the team's 108 points and sort of did a role reversal, which we can talk about too. Usually it's Luka early, Kyrie late. They did a little bit of a flip there. Mavs shot almost 50%, just 6 of 25 from the three versus the Mavs going 18 of 49 from three. When you're jacking up 50, they're not falling. Maybe go to the paint, but they didn't. They were outscored in the paint, 62-38. So now, get ahead of the market. If you want to buy the dip, Timberwolves plus 140 to win the series, a flip from where they opened as a minus 170 favorite. Senior, you and I like to talk about this a lot. Getting the plus money when it feels right. But after that game one, does it feel right?
You know what? It's boy. Dallas was impressive. The outscoring in the paint of 62-38 was a bit surprising for me, though I know Rudy Gobert is not the offensive guy we're thinking about. He's more that defensive guy. And Cat loves to tell everybody what a great big man he is by shooting away from the basket. So maybe we shouldn't be too shocked at that. But what did go on here is Ant-Man, Anthony Edwards, did not have that game, right? He talked about, I'm happy to be matched up with Kyrie and looking forward to that battle. And we'll hear from Kyrie on what he thought of that. But this was what we had talked about, your stars showing up like they did with Luka and with Kyrie both being over 30 points. Other guys were off a little bit. PJ Washington, not the normal night we had seen out of him, missing some shots. I think he was 4 of 10. But this duo, and it was early late, Mike. I believe it was Kyrie 24 of 30 in the first half, and then it was Luka with 15 of his, what did he have, 33 in the fourth quarter. So, it wasn't all in bunches, or I should say in one spot for both of them, so they spread it out. But I was impressed with what they did in the paint because the long shot, 6 of 25 from three, just wasn't working for them.
And I do want to say, just quickly, I don't know if I said they scored 88. They scored or assisted those two on 88 of the points, GoJo.
Yeah, and I think that was it. Is we talked about the matchup inside with Gafford and Lively on the one side for the Dallas Mavericks, and then Towns and Gobert on the other side as this indicator of what was going to go on in the paint. But really, when we talk about paint scoring, it was Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic getting to the basket, or especially in Luka's case, Luka getting into the painted area, getting those defenders hung up in pick and roll, and either making plays or putting the ball in the basket himself here. And we said yesterday, a lot of this series was going to hinge on that matchup, the backcourt matchup, where you had Anthony Edwards as a primary defender. You had, Luka Doncic, who's been challenged in that way and stepped up to the challenge. And Dad, I think the biggest difference in game one was just how healthy Luka looked. I think that's one of the things that's kind of the X factor throughout the last couple rounds in the playoffs is where are we at with Luka's body holding up over the course of this postseason, considering he's been banged up for a while. He's been dealing with the sprained knee for a while. All these things for a guy that's already not the best athlete in the NBA, but an incredibly gifted offensive player. And last night you saw the latter show up in a way that's going to be really dangerous for Minnesota because, Anthony Edwards is an incredibly prolific offensive player, but we've seen sometimes it's not always been that consistent 30-plus point output that is more normal even among superstars. But you're dealing with a force on the other side in Luka Doncic that's the best scorer probably right now in the NBA.
Yeah, you are. And I love watching Luka on when he goes to the hoop and doesn't get a call. Because we've talked about the whiny Luka, right? When he would just whine to the ref. There were times he would look at the ref, kind of look, and then he would do the kind of throw his hand like, oh, I'm not gonna get into it, and just run down the court. But you could tell he was aggravated. You're just wondering when he's going to go off and maybe get teed up for it again, because he just loves to say he was hit on every single play. Maybe he is, but I mean, my God, who isn't in this day and age in the NBA? But I'm with you. I mean, and think about what they did. This was not a game of free throws either. What it was, Minnesota taking 18. And Dallas taking 17. Dallas just missed one of them, while Minnesota missed 7. And in a tight game, those are the things you look at, quite honestly, when that's a freebie. And no defense. It's just you in the basket, and you got to make it. And Minnesota misses 7 of those. That cost you. Minnesota had a nice run But then they had the turnover in the fourth quarter, but 5 of their 10 turnovers are in the fourth quarter. They're making the mistakes that we saw the Pacers make in game 1 with their 21, 22 turnovers. There seems to be that great discrepancy on either one. Either way, it's too damn many, for the Pacers. But that's when Minnesota had most of their turnovers. Half of their turnovers came in the fourth quarter. So having the lead, but then losing the lead on some of their own mistakes, and then really good play by Dallas.
Yeah, and Anthony Edwards lauded his head coach, Chris Finch, for keeping it honest with them and keeping it a buck, and he did so after the game in his assessment of that fourth quarter run where all of a sudden they decided they didn't want to hold on to the basketball.
It's down the stretch. Bad shots, turnovers, no composure, and thought for the same at the end of the first half. We haven't really closed quarters very well, closed halves very well over the last handful of games. It cost us one game in the Denver series, and it certainly had an impact on this game tonight too. So we got to be better in clutch moments.
And, Dad, I think that part is the one that, certainly you put on Anthony Edwards, because as the star player who's also going to be one of your primary ball handlers, that's on him. But Mike Conley, who we've talked about as the adult in the room, there are too many people I trust in that backcourt for Minnesota that shouldn't be allowing things like that to happen. But it was sloppy, careless basketball down the stretch. And I think that's the thing that's probably most disheartening if you're a Timberwolves fan waking up this morning is talent-wise, yeah, listen, Kyrie and Luka are going to do that every once in a while. You account for that in the model when you're looking at this series overall and trying to project it going forward, but you've got to have some composure down the stretch, and that complete loss of it that Chris Finch mentioned there is the only disheartening thing I would say you come away with from game 1 for them.
Yeah, and we talk about the matchups of the big guys in the middle, what's going on in the paint. We just mentioned the paint scoring, though, as we said, the Minnesota big guys aren't monsters in the paint from a scoring standpoint. Remember, Karl Anthony Towns almost took half of his 20 shots from three-point land, but they were also out-rebounded 48-40, which by Dallas, which is pretty impressive. So where you think they would dominate defensively in the paint, it was Dallas who was getting those rebounds, out-rebounding them by 8 there. And then look at Kyrie on defense. I mean, the guys he was guarding, they shot 27%, 3 of 11. So he's playing some defense. Luka's playing some defense. It's a word you don't use a lot with Dallas, especially with a guy like Luka, but we have talked about their numbers and how they have gotten better. So a big one for them. I mean, of going in and stealing one, I thought in all honesty, both road teams should have won game 1. The Pacers just gacked that one away. Hopefully for the fan, we don't have a horse in this race. I hope we see 7 like this.
Yeah, it big. I hope we get 6 more of those energy coming off this game. But did it change any of the way you think about this, Dad? I know I picked Wolves in 7 in this series. I forget what you picked yesterday.
I picked the Wolves in 7 as well. I wanted to go Dallas, just like I wanted to go underdog, like I did with the Pacers. I picked Pacers in 7. But I'm telling you, listen, Luka is going to score. Anthony Edwards got held down a little bit. Kyrie, you're not sure either. He's going to give you a ton of assists or he's going to score 30+, which he did last night. But, man, he is still so much fun to watch. I don't know if I want to change yet. The biggest issue to me, or the biggest thing I saw, was the biggest thing that we had talked about, how Dallas dominated the interior on Oklahoma City because they were a little smaller, and Chet Holmgren, not the beefiest guy in the world, to now 2 bigger guys, though we have kind of talked about their roles a little bit, of how Dallas was able to have success on the inside, scoring and then rebounding on the defensive end. That, to me, makes me kind of go, oh, wow, I wonder if I should be changing right now, but I'm not going to change one game in.
No, I don't think so, especially for a game this close. But I think, Claudia, just kind of reinforces on the other side everything that we've seen from Luka Doncic and having a running mate like Kyrie Irving now, and how, going forward, certainly the Mavs still have plenty of opportunity in this postseason. And I saw the stat yesterday, courtesy of the Elias Sports Bureau, as we talk about like the bigger picture look at this series, that this is the first time we have had a Final Four in the NBA without a current or former MVP in the field of players. So it's kind of a clean slate. We've talked about this as a jumping off point for the future of the league as we're sort of sunsetting some of the all-time great players that we've had and allowing these new ones to come in and take center stage. Luka Doncic sort of being led along by the only guy left in this that you would really qualify as an elder statesman of sorts. I guess that's not fair to like, Al Horford and some of the guys that we talked about in Boston. There's others littered around, but Dallas's version of that in Kyrie Irving, a guy who has been and had championship experience, has had a litany of experience since then, and seems to have settled in on the best version of his late career self now in a way that you can plant your flag on if you're the Dallas Mavericks and build around to sustain this kind of success with Luka going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like heading into the series, that's not something that we really harped on. I feel like it's always something with the Warriors, for example. We're like, all right, they have the veteran presence, or the Lakers, they have veteran presence. We didn't really say that about the Mavs. We just talked about how the Timberwolves were young and hungry and excited and played well, and sometimes Anthony Edwards spoke like he was a veteran. And now after this one game, I'm not going to overreact because it is easy to fall to recency bias, but yeah, veteran presence does matter. And maybe the confidence was a little bit too high for the Timberwolves, and they looked at this squad and said, we're going to out-rebound them. We're bigger than them. We're going to, beat them out in the paint. The fact that Kyrie was eating them up in the paint the way that he was, and they were beating them down the court, that was a little upsetting. And I mean, look at the odds now. And like I mentioned, the Timberwolves plus 140 for the series. They're -5 for game 2. If you're going to give me 5 with the Mavs, I think that they can keep this close. Maybe they'll drop this game too, but to give me any amount of points over 3, I think with either of these squads throughout the series, it's going to be tough not to want to take it. I do think that the Timberwolves will make those adjustments, and it sounded like Finch knew exactly what they had to do. It was also pretty clear, Senior. So I do think they'll make the adjustments. I still think Minnesota will win it, but I don't think I maybe personally gave enough credit to Kyrie and this Mavs squad and what they could do in the postseason.
It's amazing too when we talk about leadership. Now in this case, Kyrie is 32. Kyrie's been around, right. But with some of these younger guys being leaders of their teams, like Anthony Edwards is 22, Luka is 25. But it feels like they've been in the league forever, right? Because you can do the one and done, so they're into the pros earlier than most other the major sports we're talking about, unless you get that hockey guy, like a Bedard or others, that have come before him that come right in there playing at 18, 19 years old, where all of a sudden they're 23 to 25 and they've been in the league 4, 5, 6 years. So that does make you a veteran. You can't look at the age. You got to look at the years in the league, getting seasoned a little bit. And that's certainly Dallas has a nice mixture of that.
They do, but I think you're right, Dad, in general, looking at this postseason, that's kind of the case. Is we've got this weird mix of young guys that have been around the block for so long, either in this league or in Luka's case, going back to his Real Madrid days. Like, he's been a professional for so long in his young life that you do really not treat them the same way, even though they don't have the same level of seasoning. And even though we know in this league, like I think we talked about it yesterday, with Drew Carter is, 27, 28, 29. That's kind of the prime age where we look at most basketball players and say, that's your window where if you're going to be one of those players that takes the step from good player to one that we talk about with a legacy and a trajectory towards something more than that, that's when you start winning a lot of those championships. Pretty much everyone involved in this postseason has a chance to get in on that well ahead of schedule for most normal players. Obviously, Anthony Edwards would be the most massive outlier here, and I think is the one that, like, quietly, like, I know and thankfully we haven't done this much in this postseason because we've had quality basketball and we've had stars spread out over a number of different markets, and it's been great for the NBA. But if we're doing the textbook, who is the NBA or what would the NBA be rooting for from here on out, I mean, getting Anthony Edwards to win a championship at 22 years old would be a coup for the league as far as building a homegrown American star, this thing that we've talked about the league has sort of not had in the same way it did in years past for a while. That would be something where, oh man, now at 22, we're allowed to start to wonder, Dad, it's kind of the Patrick Mahomes syndrome that we've seen in the NFL where we just came off this run with Tom Brady, something that we were so sure was never going to be replicated and probably still won't if you're just banking on math. But because you had Patrick Mahomes come in and so early on his career set this tempo where now he's, 26, 27 years old, whatever Mahomes is at this point, and he's already won 3 championships, you're allowed to start to wonder about some higher level stuff here. And that would be the kind of trajectory that Anthony Edwards would allow you to start to think about if he were to get over the hump here.
I would agree, but the difference to me is there's a lot of young talent on good teams like Oklahoma City. I know they were a 6 seed, but Halliburton with the Pacers as well, to where and other younger players on good teams to where if Anthony Edwards wins, I'm with you. It's a coup for the league, but I all of a sudden don't see the dominant run by Minnesota. I do think, especially in the West, that the parity is pretty good out there.
It is, and it's been interesting because we've kind of been waiting for this, and we mentioned the stat the other day. This would be the 6th straight year with a different champion in the NBA, right. The 5th straight year a finals MVP or finals team that won last year didn't even make the conference finals the following year. So you're right, that's a good indicator of parity, and it kind of dead over the recent number of years with some of these stars where you think about Giannis or you think about Anthony Davis and LeBron getting that ring, and some of the players that have won in a league that has been kind of searching for that next wave. You've seen a bunch of guys get it. It's felt like golf where someone will go on a run and win 1 or 2, or someone will look good for a little bit and win a couple of MVPs. But because we're so spoiled by LeBron James, Steph Curry, these teams that we're meeting for 5 straight years in the finals, those kinds of runs feel like they're falling short when in actuality, that's just kind of more normal accomplishment.
Yeah, absolutely right. Listen, I'm looking forward to this because of the teams left. You have a big-time star, younger, stars, say for, Boston, they're a little bit older. But I love where we are right now. I just am anxious to see how long the series Dallas and Minnesota goes and see if Luka can keep all his body parts together and not, go nuts on the referees. It's every time you see him get up, you just wonder where he's going to limp, what he's going to grab, what's going to hurt now, or if he's mad at the ref again.
Yep, we'll see which version of Luka we get in the coming nights. But coming up next, we'll give you at least one reason why Luka Doncic should be happy going into Game 2 of this series, and millions of reasons why a couple of other players should be very happy with the news that popped up yesterday in the NBA. Next here on GoJo and Golic.
GoJo and Golic. No surprises here for the 2023-24 first team All-NBA. We have SGA at the top, Giannis, Jason Tatum, Luka, and Nikola Jokic. And keep in mind, of course, you had to play a specific amount of games. So Joel Embiid, Jimmy Butler, Donovan Mitchell were not eligible for this. And I think when it comes down to it, this means one thing. You got to pay these players. And that is true, especially for Luka and SGA, GoJo.
Yeah, big time extensions coming their way for both of these guys. And Dad, this is always kind of the hot button issue with the NBA is how things like this voting for all NBA by the media can ultimately affect your payday. And we were just talking during the break now about how that 65 game minimum rule also affects this kind of stuff. And so it's a system that I still have some qualms about that. And I know there are media members. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of pressure as a member of the media voting on stuff like this, knowing that you could be the difference between, I'll just take one of the examples for Tyrese Halliburton and Anthony Edwards with their rookie extension that they were both eligible for coming up here next season. It's the difference for each of them now being named to an All-NBA team of about $41 extra million over the life of that deal. Now, I understand in deals that total over $200 million, there are some people that aren't going to necessarily feel too badly for them if they miss out on that, but you got a limited window for this stuff. Nothing's guaranteed, and so we always want to see everyone get all they possibly can. And with this now, Dad, multiple levels of the rules and structure around the way the NBA does this certainly makes that even harder than usual.
And listen, in all the other sports, if you're voted to a position and again an award to win something, that can kick in a bonus for you. So it's not like other sports don't have writers or whoever vote for certain things, something else, something kicks in your contract to get a bonus. But this is beyond. This is beyond.
This
right?
is an entirely different level because this sets the ceiling for your contract right. As opposed to right?
I just wanted to say it does happen in other sports to a lesser degree where writers and voters have an impact on what you can make. But this is well beyond that. And it doesn't have to be just first team. You make first team, second team, or third team. All NBA, you get stuff that kicks in. That can make you as much as $40 to $50 million more, which, as Mike just said, resets the ceiling. Think about, now it just happens that Doncic and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander both made first team, but what they have coming up, this blows my mind. Doncic is now eligible to sign a 5-year deal worth $346 million. Starting in the 26-27 season, he'd make $60 million. And he'd end in 2030 and 31 making $79 million a year. SGA is eligible to sign a 4-year extension worth about $294 million. His starting salary in 27-28 would be around $65 million. The final year in 2030 and 31 would earn him just over $81 million, or nearly $1 million per game. It would be the first time an NBA player's annual salary has topped $80 million. And it goes on down the line for the others that we have talked about who make an all-NBA team and get eligible for these things. It's unbelievable to me. And I'm sure a lot of people are like, how can they afford it? This league, listen, the NFL, 53-man roster, all the practice squad, you got a lot, right? And they're pulling in about $15 billion a year. NBA, a fraction of the roster, right? They're pulling in over $10 billion. So they are pulling in a ton of money for the size or for the amount of payers they have to play. That's why you always see NFL free agency. You're like, oh, wow, look at that money go out. And then even NFL players see NBA players sign deals and go, oh, my God. Oh, my God. I mean, now, nobody there is signing the Shohei Ohtani deal, $700 million in some of the baseball deals. But it is absurd the amount of money these guys are going to make, the average annual salary. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that difference, like you said, is math. It is risk. When you look at the difference in NBA contracts being largely fully guaranteed versus NFL contracts that aren't,
right?
It's because the NFL plays the most violent sport known to man, and because it's nothing mandated in either collective bargaining agreement. This isn't something that's contractually written out. This is risk management and risk assessment on the part of the people that are handing out these deals. And Dad, when you talk about the guys that these deals are handing out to, again, we just did the age thing last segment where Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's 25 years old. Like, all of these guys you're getting in the prime of their careers. That's the other thing. Like, baseball, you have all of this, different circumvention and management of their careers early on, all the control that you have as a league of them and the ways you can do that through arbitration. The NFL, you've got the salary, the franchise tag that you can use on guys to kind of manipulate that as well. And so you end up with these guys in weird pockets where age-wise, some of them get to market early on. It takes some of them a lot longer. In the NBA, you've got this whole class of stars that are all going to be eligible for these monster paydays, where if you're the team in a league where injury is much less impactful overall and year to year the product holds a lot better, that's an investment you're really comfortable in making in a league that also doesn't have a hard salary cap.
I'm with you. You used to see those baseball deals. Now, I'm glad we're finally seeing it happen skewing younger, but we'd see a 31 or 32-year-old sign a 10-year deal, right? For a few $100 million, where the back end of that, however many years you want to say, 3-4 years on the back end, are going to be worthless, and they're going to try and get out of it, and they're going to do everything they can to work around that. But it's going to be there. Where I just mentioned SGA. You said he's 25? Remember, these are extensions, so they don't kick in for a bit. So as I mentioned, his last year would be the 2030-31 season. So even 7 years from now, he's Kyrie or Irving's age. And Kyrie is playing really well. But SGA is still can be playing some really good basketball as he's potentially earning $81 million. I can't fathom that. We see a lot of money go around, and it's almost like monopoly money anymore. It shouldn't affect me the way it does. But to think that you could play an NBA game and make $1 million. Now, NFL guys are making, $50 million a year. They're making $3 million a game, So, but 82 games to make basically $1 million a game is unbelievable.
Yeah, so it's incredible. And you're psyched for all these guys. Like, in general, too, I think, Dad, looking at these all NBA teams and looking the way it's set up and seeing the names in there, like, seeing LeBron James down on the third team is a good sign of the times and kind of where we're at right now. It was also interesting after the year they've had and all the conversation around it, Giannis still being a first-team All-NBA guy is a good reminder that, the Bucks are probably going to be more fine than we give them credit for once they steady the ship this offseason. But it is a reminder, that guy is still in heavy contention at any given moment for the best player on the planet. But the rest of these guys are tending to be a lot of the young names that we've talked about leaking up in here. I know we won't get to the sound right here, but Kenny Smith went on Inside the NBA last night and got absolutely roasted by Charles for saying that the face of the NBA is coming out of the Western Conference at the series. And Dad, at the same time, I don't think he's wrong in that assessment. Boston, even if Jason Tatum wins, he's not going to be the face of the NBA. That's a guy that doesn't seem like he has any earthly interest in that. And Tyrese Halliburton is a guy that's got that kind of potential, but I think is probably a year away in the way of people being accepting to that. So
I'm a big fan of Halliburton. I think he eventually could, but who doesn't want Anthony Edwards to be that guy, right? You're 22. You're a must listen at pressers, right? On what he's going to say.
I think that's part of it. I think that's part of it is you've got to be someone that's willing to engage in that way.
Yes. So, he's the one I kind of point to and say, I want to hear what that guy has to say for the next 10 years. We'd be remiss really quick. There were obviously, you mentioned Durant was on second team. Kawhi Leonard was also on the second team. Steph was on the third team. LeBron was on the third team. Got to give him his due. That LeBron James has been picked in 20 of his 21 seasons, the most all time. Kareem, Kobe, and Duncan are next with 15 selections each. James did receive one first place vote, meaning he got at least one first place vote in 19 of his 21 seasons. Pretty damn impressive for an old man, as I'm doing air quotes for those and not watching this and listening. You're just going to be listening. It's pretty damn impressive.
I was going to say, like he does with reading in real life, as we've tried to all turn the page to the next generation of stars, LeBron James still very much holding on to that current page for dear life.
Here on GoJo and Golic, and the commencement speech held by Chiefs kicker Harrison Butker was heard around the world. He gave it at Benedictine College. And specifically, he talked about the most diabolical lies that have been told to women, and he used his wife Isabel as an example, saying that graduates should be most excited to take on the vocation of a homemaker, speaking specifically to women. So everybody has an opinion about this. This was a Catholic school, if that means anything to you. Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and even Roger Goodell had something to say about it.
There's just certain values that you have that some people emphasize more than others, and there's just certain things that I didn't necessarily agree with. But at the same time, I'm not going to judge him by that. I judge him by the way he acts every single day, and I'm not going to get into the full details of the entire speech. But at the same time, I know what type of person he is.
We're a microcosm of life here. Everybody from different areas, different religions, different races. And so we all get along. We all respect each other's, opinions, and not necessarily do we go by those, but we respect everybody to have a voice. It's a great thing about America, man.
Listen, we have over 3,000 players. We have executives around the league. They have a diversity of opinions and thoughts, just like America does. I think that's something that we treasure, and that's part of, I think, ultimately what makes us as a society better.
So the reason I mentioned the Catholic school at the top is, and I come from a Catholic background, it is traditional. That's traditional. The wife stays at home. She's a homemaker. She provides for the family. Of course, I'm a woman who will probably work my whole life because I enjoy working. I grew up with my mom working and being a homemaker at the same time, and that is what a lot of women do. And then there's some who stick to the traditional role and they're comfortable in that. So I think what made this so controversial is because the people who were not there didn't hear the full speech. And even if you did hear the full speech and you didn't agree with it, that's fine. When you're given a platform and you're given a microphone, you just gotta be careful leaning too far one way or the other, whether it's politics, whether it's religion, all of those things, money, that we're not really supposed to talk about. So that's the issue. I don't disagree. I think some women maybe are really excited to go. I have friends who say their end goal is to be a homemaker and a stay-at-home wife, and I totally respect that. I don't necessarily agree, but maybe someday I will. So from a woman's perspective, I understand, maybe that is what his wife wanted to do. Maybe there was women in the audience. That is their goal. He just didn't put it the right way. And he had time to think about it, and he wrote out that speech, and I'm sure he read it to some people, and nobody put up the red flag. A little strange to me. I don't want to say I think it was overblown, but it is true. There are women out there who, being a homemaker is what they want to do.
I don't think he feels there was any red flags. That's the thing. I think he wrote it out, knew exactly what he was saying. So I agree with what Mahomes and Andy Reid said, is you can have your opinion, just don't be hurting anybody, because we can all agree there's too much arguing that goes on. I disagree with a lot of things he said. But you know what? If that's his feeling, I was raised Catholic as well. We raised our kids Catholic as well. So I understand what he was saying because that was preached, some to us growing up. Certainly when I was growing up, certainly when my parents were growing up. I disagree with a lot he said, but I'm not going to sit here and just cuss him out. Right. Those are his beliefs. Everybody is allowed to have their beliefs. Like I said, as long as you're not hurting anybody, okay, physically hurting anybody, have your beliefs. I could disagree with his beliefs. I disagree with him. But people are saying the Chiefs should cut him. Come on. He has his opinion. You can disagree with it. I'm sure there's many women out there that agree with it and many women out there that disagree with it. And that's fine. You know what? Have your opinion. God forbid anybody have a conversation about anything, but just completely just say, cancel him, fire him. So there's just no conversation anymore. And I've had plenty of conversations with a guy like Reggie White, who was a Christian and had his beliefs on certain things. And I disagreed with some of them. And we would talk about that. And we actually had conversation about it. No yelling, no cussing at one another, no saying somebody should be fired. You're allowed to have it. And at the end of the day, if you disagree, that's fine. I just respect each other's opinion for it.
Yeah, I understand there's, I think, two separate parts of this. One, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, they're in an offseason right now where for Andy Reid's perspective as the leader of that team, basically the only headlines they've had as of late have been bad off the field headlines. It's been Harrison Butker's speech. It's been everything that's gone on with Rashee Rice, it seems, every step of the way this offseason. After a year where they hit all of the fine notes football-wise in terms of this offseason compared to last offseason, coming off defending the Super Bowl twice. So those guys are trying to get through this and trying to basically say as little as possible so as to not let this linger, because their goals are different. Their goals are to try and go out here and just get back to football and not necessarily take a stance on this that makes problems for them in their eyes inside the locker room, which you can disagree with that or not, but I understand what they're doing in this instance there. Dad, as far as the other stuff, it's this endless circle of saying everyone has the right to their opinion and say what they want. The point is everyone, Harrison Butker started this conversation. To Claudia's point, Harrison Butker chose his words carefully. Now, he talking about the traditional Latin Mass and stuff, he comes from a group of Catholics that are even warring inside Catholicism. This man is even a harder line in the sand on a lot of this stuff. And that's what I have the disagreement with here. And Dad, it is about the environment that it creates for other people, because what he's saying and what he said in this speech were things that he believes are policy issues that he disagrees with based on his faith, things that he wants to see enacted in terms of how, reproductive rights of women that he mentioned there, some other things relating to the LGBTQ plus community in there. It wasn't just him going after women in the home, where again, the issue was not, this idea that being a homemaker isn't a proud vocation. Like, that's
Right.
no one is saying that. Everyone understands that whatever a woman or anyone else chooses to be is a great thing. But it's the fact that he decided to position it as, oh, you've been told vaguely diabolical lies, and then never follows up on what those diabolical lies are. And the way he framed everything else, the way he framed Pride Month, the way he framed things like IVF or surrogacy when it came to pregnancy are all deeply offensive and related to policy that he would, I'm sure in his heart of hearts, and it sounded like there, want to see enacted. And that's the problem, is when you use religion as this veil to try and create policy that would hurt other people, I believe. And we're seeing right now in different areas hurt other people in a nation that's supposed to be founded on religious freedom, where that one ideology is not the thing that's supposed to drive it all.
But it's still his opinion on it, right, about the policy. And he's not going to change policy with his speech. Most things we talk about, if you give an opinion, maybe are about that you want to see things changed or see things go down a certain road, whether it's in this society, around the world, wherever. So I still look at it as he has this feeling about something, and I agree. I'm with you. It was about policy as well. And as I said, I completely disagree with a lot of his thoughts, without question. But I'm also not going to go to the other side and ask for his head on a platter.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I want to be very clear. I don't think Harrison Butker should lose his job. I think this is just one of those things where now we've got information. You know where Harrison Butker stands, and now we all get to decide how to engage with someone like that going forward. I think that part you're absolutely right about, Dad. The notion that he should have ever lost his job is ridiculous. That should not happen, especially not for something like this relative to what we've seen elsewhere in the NFL, where guys have been allowed to keep their jobs. Like, he said things that I disagree with about a very hot button subject at graduation. Shouldn't lose his job. And I don't think anyone of like actual sound mind was saying that he should lose his job, at least from what I've seen. It's like a change.org petition.
Vehemently disagree with so many things he said. But yeah, shouldn't lose his job for Claudia.
I was going to say, I think it's just the effect of social media. And that's why the woman being the homemakers thing got so ingrained in my mind, because it's all these women doing videos like Harrison Butker hates women and this and that.
Yeah.
So I had to go watch this actual speech to be like, what is he saying? And I think it's just the way that he framed things. He went too extremist. I don't know. Like, I can remember my commencement speech a little bit sooner maybe than you guys can. I'm sure you can still remember yours, but the idea is to like send the students off into life and make it happy and light, and it wasn't. So
I don't remember mine.
Okay. Well.
I don't remember mine.
Yeah, the least surprising development of this entire segment.
This picture. way to wrap up hour one of GoJo and Golic than snack time and watching GoJo roll his eyes and moan at certain foods, which you will find if you go to his Twitter at Mike Golic Jr. And these are just some of the snacks from this week. He gets a lot done, like high volume. I've never seen 2 of the 3 of these. These are Sour Patch Oreos, which was an interesting video as well. I'd like to get the take on these 3, but what we have to share with everyone, in case you missed it, is his take on the new McDonald's Grandma McFlurry.
Let's see what we got right here. Good little bite. It's the perfect Werther's taste. If you loved the candy, you're going to love this. This is nice and soft, easy. Like, honestly, if you were a person of grandma age that might need dentures or something like that, this would go down real smooth. All around, aces for McDonald's. This is incredibly loyal to the source material, which, as we talk about a lot of these, is really important to me. Nailed it. Go out and get this. Absolutely big recommend.
I was expecting more eye rolls, but it's fine. Of grandma age, I like how you put that one, Joe.
Yeah, what was that? If you have dentures, this is easy to eat. And also, I love, here, let's take a little bite. And you had this heaping spoonful. I thought you were going to get a brain freeze out of that thing.
I was thinking that too.
Listen, size is all a relative thing for everyone when it comes to this stuff. Listen, I don't know what you guys want with me. Words are hard sometimes when you're overcome by the spirit and the sugar. And that's kind of what happened yesterday. And this is my quest to just make sure, because you know what? Yeah, there we go. There's the eye roll scene around the world. I didn't realize my eyes could go that far back in my head. This is enlightening there. But yeah, shout out to the Grandma McFlurry, man. A lot of people had questions, and I can say this. At least based on what I saw, this was not made with real bits of grandma. As many people were concerned, McDonald's might be grinding up grandmothers to make their McFlurries. It's like butterscotch crumbles and butterscotch syrup here to mimic the Werther's candy, which I don't know about you, Claudia. Dad, I'm sure you love Werther's candy because you're an old person. But Claudia, like, how do you feel about those?
Yeah, my Nana, rest in peace, she passed recently, and we had to like take a truck to take out the caramel candies that she has. She was strapped with those things. When I grew up, I probably I could have got diabetes. I didn't, but because she was just dishing those things out. So, yeah. And she loved ice cream because this makes me sad because she would have loved this. But I like how they made it with low-fat vanilla ice cream because that balances it out, right? Yeah.
I actually don't like Werther's. I'm not a big fan of butterscotch. So, but I mean, from my grandma's, like you just said, Claudia, my grandmas that I went to, they did have the candy dishes. It's different today. Like Mike, your mother, who is a Gigi, I'll say, she's a grandmother, but she goes by Gigi, to 2 grandkids. For her, the candy out in her dish, the big one, is Starburst jelly beans, which are absolutely fantastic. I mean, absolutely. The problem is they will rarely make it to the grandchildren because my big fat ass hand is in there too much grabbing them. It is they are just fantastic. So the candy gamed by grandmothers has been upped without a doubt. But yeah, I am not a Werther's fan, Mike.
Oh, that's a damn shame that you lack the taste to appreciate some of the finer things in life like I do here. But Dad, what you brought up with the advancement and the evolution of candy is exactly why I go on these quests, because a lot of these companies out here, between the folks at Reese's or Oreo or now even McDonald's, are going out here and letting it get a little freaky. They're getting a little naughty out on Main, and they're coming up with some of these concoctions and things like the Sour Patch Kid Oreos that, quite frankly, should they exist?
No.
Probably not. But do they? And do I thus need to try them? Absolutely.
How many of those did you have? I just got to ask.
I mean, I've probably had 10 since I did the video for that. It's one of those things where they're definitely not like good or bad. Those are constructs and judgment words that we don't need to apply to this. They are interesting. I have never been hit by an aroma from an Oreo cookie, and I pulled these open. It was like smelling salts. It immediately hits you right in the front and get you going a little bit. But that being said, it's still Oreo. It's still cream and cookie. And so, yeah, the taste is a little bit different. The after effect's a little bit sour. But you keep it moving because it's the only sugar I have in my pantry right now, and I desperately need that because I'm an addict.
All right, couple of questions. First, and you have reviewed a lot of product in your car. What's been the best? What's got the highest grade?
God, I don't even remember at this point. I'd have to look back recently. I mean, let's put it this way: this butterscotch one, I usually go out of 10. It was 9.7 out of 10. That's usually as high as I'm gonna go. Like the 9.9 out of 10 for me is reserved for what I think is the greatest candy bar of all time, and that's the Reese's Fast Break Bar. I think it's the best Reese's product. I think it's the best candy bar on the market, and I think that's the only one I would even come close to approaching a 10 on there. But there have been others that have certainly touched the sky.
So the other question for both of you is, Mike, your mother, my wife, has said that Oreo is coming out with a sugar-free Oreo. And I don't know how I feel about that. It's almost like if I'm going to eat the cookie, or it's the other thing, sugar-free ice cream. You know, if I'm going to go down the road of a cookie or a sweet or ice cream, am I going to cheat myself out of what I know I shouldn't be having the sugar as much as I do? But am I going down that road just to say, oh, I can have it now because it's supposedly less sugar? I don't really buy into that.
I think it's different for different products, because I would say, looking at the no sugar or sugar alternative, like in the drinks, like what that gave us with Diet Coke is a drink that exists almost in a completely separate taste category than its predecessor in regular Coca-Cola. And I love Diet Coke. I've never drank it and thought, oh man, I wish I could just have the regular Coke. Sometimes it takes on a different form of its own, and sometimes that's what people need. Claudia, I mean, Dad, you come from a world of type 2 diabetics. Maybe these people want to enjoy the Oreos without the conflict with their health.
I don't know. I like to be healthy. I'm a healthy gal. I have a fitness app. Like, I need to be healthy. So I have to say I do get the sugar-free, and I feel like that's super lame.
Really?
You're right. It is lame, but I love sweets, so I got to keep it in line.
But you say you love sweets, but you're eating sugar-free whatever. I mean, the healthy ice cream, let's be honest, tastes nothing like a good tub of regular ice cream.
Sure.
And I got to imagine these sugar-free Oreos aren't going to taste like the true double stuffs that I cram into my
You're always going to be sacrificing. Let's put it this way. If you're not sacrificing any taste for that, you're ingesting a chemical that's probably going to give you a bad time later on in life.
I was just going to say, like, all the stevia and the fake sugar really is worse. You're better off just having the real sugar, because it bloats you in all this.
My point is, just eat less of the good stuff, but make it the good stuff.
Yeah,
right?
you say that, and then you have one Oreo and the sleeve's gone 2 seconds later.
Yeah,
They're
I was
too
just
damn
saying,
good.
man. I mean, that's
Ice cream, like,
Eating
come on.
one Oreo is like trying to eat one potato chip. It just doesn't happen.
Oh, never. No.
I'm with
physically impossible. So shout out
Mike,
to
what's
those little
next?
freaks at Oreo.
What's next, Mike? Do you have what's next in your review?
No, I don't. I'm guided by the Spirit. I know we talked a lot about religion in the last segment, but when it comes to this, I am guided by the Spirit. I look to see where either the internet directs me or to where the checkout counter at your local 7-Eleven or gas station directs me. It's really not an overly complicated process. And thankfully now, because I put that beacon out as someone who's been willing to be publicly fat online for the benefit of others in their quest for new and never-ending snacks, now anytime people see something weird, they just bring it right to me and they're like, hey, have you tried this yet? I go out there and try it, and then we all keep it moving.
Can't tell you how proud I am, hon. I can't tell you how proud I am, son, about that. I can't, because
call me hun.
I went to say son and I said hun. Sorry about that.
I was gonna say, I was really,
Honey.
I was like,
Oh, my
what the
son.
hell
So it
happened
doesn't
there?
really matter. But I'm glad you've come down that road as a former fat guy who used to eat donuts on the second and third day of the NFL draft while throwing cookies to the crowd out there. I'm glad you've embraced that part of your life and you use it for the good. Use your powers for the good.
As I said, I am the son of a type 2 diabetic who's the son of a type 2 diabetic. It is quite literally in my blood to do this, and I couldn't avoid it if I wanted to here. So I'm Mike Golic Jr. on Twitter if you want to see more of this debauchery on a usually weekly basis here, because I've got to keep those blood panels somewhat in line. We will wrap this segment with more smart stuff coming up next. Domonique Foxworth, ESPN football analyst, going to join us and probably not talk about cookies next. friend of the program, one of our favorite guests here, Domonique Foxworth, ESPN football analyst and host of the Domonique Foxworth Show, wherever you get your podcast. Him and his producer, Charlie Kravitz, killing it over there. And in this case for us today, fresh back from a trip from the barber shop here, if you can't tell by the absolute crispy line in front. So, hey, Domonique, how you doing?
I appreciate it. Thank you for recognizing it. But I don't know if I blame the camera or what, but it feels like this is a good place to have this conversation. My hairline is creeping on me, man. It's creeping on me. When I hold my head like this, I feel good about it. When I lift my head up, it's a little bit embarrassing. So I feel like at some point I need one of you guys to tell me it's time to come on home because I'm not ready yet.
Well, it ain't going to be me because, as you can see, the lettuce is still strong here. So I don't want to be that guy to have a full head of hair and tell somebody else they got to come on home. That's the job of Mike. That's the job of my son right there.
I was just going to say, we're like, this shot of us is like the evolution of man poster where it's just going from dad's hairline to Domonique all the way over to me. What I will say, Domonique, is actually, like, for a lot of people who catch you on, the right time with Bomani Jones for Foxworth Friday, Bomani was the one that got me to come on home. Like, he was the person that cared about me enough to have that conversation, and then went during the pandemic, just completely betrayed me and grew his hair back.
Yeah, he's been advocating. He's been nudging. He's been gently nudging. I need to come on home, but I refuse to accept it. I think that he's just trying to drag me in there with him. I can fight it. I know where the hairline's supposed to be, right here. I know where it's not supposed to be, right back here somewhere. But right in this area, it's gray. I feel like it's dealer's choice, baby. I'm riding this out. I know somebody who like it. That's all that matters.
All I got to say is I'm 61 years old. I'm glad I don't have this issue to worry about. I got enough problems going on that I got to deal with. So I don't have to worry about coming on home or not. I just have to worry about if I'm going to put product in my hair or not.
Looks
Must
good.
be nice.
The gray, I got a thing for gray, and it annoys my wife because, like, I really get upset if she tries to pluck her grays or even hints about dyeing. It's like, no, like, I don't know. I'm into it. I like it. It looks good. I think it looks good on men. I think it looks great on women. It looks bad. I think what I'm concerned about, and this is a whole different thing, where it's people who are trying to be like current when it's clear that you're not anymore. And I feel like dyeing your hair is also kind of that move where it's like, look, man, it's fine. We know at a certain point, you're 60 years old, like, we know it's supposed to be gray. It's like the kid, It's like me being 40 trying to wear the latest clothes, whatever the kids are wearing these days. Like, we know you 40, man. Stop that bullshit. Take that off and put on some adult clothes.
I was talking to my sister and tried to say snatched the other day in some Gen Z slang and realized that I was offending everyone, including myself, trying to do that. So, yeah, it's really anything. When you try and hang on too long, when you try and stay too late at the party, that's where you're going to get yourself in trouble. So, Domonique, I promise I'll help be a buddy in this if it gets to that point where now I feel like, no disrespect to the king, but once you get to the Stephen A range, that's probably when we're going to have to sit down and have the conversation there. So, but that's a story for another day. Domonique, obviously there's a lot of things that we could talk to you about here. One of the things I love about your podcast is, like, obviously you guys do a little bit of everything. I have learned more about professional tennis from your guys' podcast than almost anything in the world. But one of my favorite things to talk with you about is CBA issues. So before we get to any football stuff, I was thinking of you the other day because I heard you and Charlie talking about the sort of sweet spot that we've been in with women's basketball, coming off of everything in March Madness, the place that the sport is in as a business right now at both the college and professional level. But one of the things that had come up recently was this Las Vegas Aces situation where they're being investigated right now by the WNBA because you had the Las Vegas Tourism Board offering $100,000 basically NIL deal to the players on the team. And for some of those players, that's much more than they're making in salary with their current WNBA salary. And the league looking into it because it feels like salary cap manipulation was something interesting to me. So I didn't know how much you looked into that situation or what you thought of that in terms of how it fits in relative to the way we talk about salary capped leagues.
Yeah, you know me. I'm going to fall on the side of players. I'm well-versed in the WNBA, CBA, but it sounds like an endorsement. Just because all the players on the team have an endorsement, there's nothing wrong with an entire team having an endorsement. There are unfair advantages depending on where you are in the country. It's just the way it is, like taxes in Florida and Texas, like these things that we hear about every time we're on free agency, strip clubs in Atlanta and Houston. These are things that are attractive to certain people. Access to tech funds in San Francisco. Like these are real things that players think about. The media impact of being in New York, and maybe also being in Vegas. The tourism board seems like a potential benefit to being there. And honestly, to me, it doesn't seem like anything worth fighting over. It seems like a pretty obvious open and shut case, unless this was something that was orchestrated by the Aces front office. They went to the tourism board and was like, look, and unless they found a situation where some players, like you think back to Joe Smith's situation where there was a secret contract signed between him and the team owner about him taking a smaller deal to get money later. Unless there was some sort of premeditated agreement, this seems like it's all above board. It's like suggesting that players can't have endorsements, which just seems asinine, honestly.
Completely agree. And again, in this day and age, if they tried to circumvent that by having that secret communication to do this, then they're going to get nailed at some point, because you always do. But if this was just the tourism board going to the players individually, their agents, I'm with you. I don't see a thing they could do. I'm going a different route of when somebody is smarter than me, and I know smarter than Mike as well, in this situation. Now, if people don't know, we've mentioned it plenty of times that you had various roles with the NFLPA and also COO of the NBA's Players Association as well. So you're well versed in different sports there as well. That said, solve college basketball NIL issues right now.
Sure, no problem. Remove all restrictions. It's not like what's happened with college sports is that, I mean, it happens in a lot of industries, is rather than address the actual issues that are there, they're trying to keep in place the power structure. And no matter what, if you're going to keep putting Band-Aids on this problem, like it seems like the most basic thing you can do is recognize that it is now real professional sports. And forget professional sports, it's a real profession. And we don't have these restrictions anywhere else. And I think the way that you do it is, at least the way that I've been taught as an American, is you have the market as free as possible. And then you create rules to address situations where people are exploiting the freedom that is there. Like rules like anti-monopoly rules and antitrust rules, those came up because people were violating the system. And so I think that's the same thing you do now, is we've had these systems that exist and they aren't perfect, but they work in every other industry than this one. The problem is they're trying to pretend like this is high school sports, and it's not. And I understand why you would have certain restrictions on high school sports, and I understand why you would have them on college sports at one point, but they're signing multi-billion-dollar television contracts. So stop it. It all just seems dumb. You should just start from scratch, start it over. And if these players are employees of the institutions, then that's what they are, and pay them as such.
We have plenty of time to talk about the rest of that. That's high level. That's the nerd stuff I love talking to you about. I want to talk about football nerd stuff with you, because I know you and I saw and digested that same Ted Nguyen article from the New York Times talking about Mike Macdonald's defenses. And I think this is fascinating. We've talked so much over recent years in football about the Sean McVay and Shanahan offensive coaching tree spreading around the NFL. And we kind of had the Mike Macdonald coaching tree start to branch off this offseason around the league. And I guess I wanted your perspective as, a former defensive player who played in an incredible defense in Baltimore with some Hall of Famers, and the way you guys structured things. When you look at Mike Macdonald's defense right now and the reason it's kind of becoming popular, what is it about it that stands out to you? What is it, whether schematically or Mike Macdonald teaching or otherwise, that makes this thing something that other people are so hell-bent on copying now?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a way to explain this that doesn't feel cliche, but I do think that oftentimes defense is about addressing what the offense is giving you, whereas Mike McDaniel's defense is simple enough. And that's the big thing. I think the article suggested that a lot like the Shanahan and McVay offenses, this defense appears complex, but is simple for the players to understand. That's the biggest factor, is you don't want to make mistakes, but you want to give the offense a bunch of things to think about. In the week leading up to a game, you want them to be like, all right, so we have to divide up our time in such that we need to address these things. And you want them to look at their practice schedule and be like, man, we don't actually know what they're going to do. We don't know what to focus on. We don't know what to prepare for. We know that we don't know who is coming, because that's what happens oftentimes. And that was like the masterpiece that was Peyton Manning, was he would study so much that there was a one person 1 foot out of position, putting themselves in the position to get to their assignment, that the disguise wasn't worthwhile. And he knew what was coming. I think that's part of the effectiveness of this. Is oftentimes we'd look at offenses and like, all right, if this guy is in the slot 2 yards from the end of the line of scrimmage, we know that no matter who the guy is, if someone is there, no matter what the formation is around them, we know that through the last 4 games, they've always gone to this concept. Maybe a guy will come from far left to get to this concept. Maybe he'll come from far right. But after all, we're going to get a smash concept on this side of the field. And if you can remove those keys and do so many things and have people do things from different positions, but you're still running the same defense, so for you, the rules are simpler. I think that's really the power of what he's been able to do, is going into game plans, you're like, I mean, they could do this, this, and this, or they could do this, this, and this. But for us on the defensive side of the ball, it doesn't require any extra practice time. We're going to go out there and hit you with all these different things, and you're not going to know what's coming. And then at halftime, it's easy for us to switch it all up again, because it's all the same shit we've been running since training camp. It's just different people doing it at different times.
It's, to try and explain it, it's fun to do nerd football. And when we're analyzing in the booth doing this, to sit there and try and explain all that deep into the weeds, I never like doing it. I like to do the KISS thing, keep it simple, stupid. Right. Even though we could go into it. To me, it's as simple as one word. I go back to my Philly days, but again, we had great players like Reggie White, Clyde Simmons, Eric Allen, and Buddy Ryan running the defense, who basically just said, line up, we're going to beat your ass. We got corners that can cover you, and we got D linemen that can beat you. So we don't need to do the word I'm going to say. It seems today, Dominique, that word is confusion, right? I mean, you have people lined up everywhere. The guy used to do college games with way back a few years ago was Bill Curry, and he would call it the minnow bucket defense. You had everybody standing and moving around, and then at the snap, it was like you stuck your hand in a bucket of minnows, and they just scattered. So the offense doesn't know what's coming or who's coming, and so a lot of times you still have a 4-man rush, but all of a sudden you got a free rusher because you confuse the offense.
You got a 4-man rush come from one side, or it's not, and you still end up having not sacrifice your coverage. I appreciate how you took all the words that I said for 60 seconds and just said confusion and communicated everything. That's why you are a Hall of Famer. That sucks. But I will say, in the defense of the modern defenses, is the game has changed a lot and the rules have changed so much that we can't just line up across from people and beat their ass. Like, you can sometimes, but that's not enough. You have to find some way to tilt the odds in your favor, but you also always got to have great players. And it seems like that's another consistent thing with McDonald, is the center, like the spine of the defense is important. The nose, the mic, the safeties, and we'll figure out other things in other places. But that seems like the most important part to be able to build from this. And that's where a lot of these modern offenses attack, is that center of the defense.
Yeah, you've got to still have a big bad that opposing offenses, or whatever the opposing side of the football is, has to worry about and has to buy up their attention with, so that the rest of that stuff gets home. Like, I think the term that's popped up a lot with the Shanahan-McVay guys is the illusion of complexity, right? It looks like you're giving all this stuff, but really it's like simple concepts. And that to me was always, from the teaching aspect, the way I enjoyed football more was, hey, the best coach I ever had was Harry Hiestand, who coached at Notre Dame in the NFL and put all those first rounders in. And it was like, I can go over a bunch of situations, but to Dominique's point, I'm never going to be able to cover everything that you're going to see within the body of the game. So what I'm going to give you is tools and rules. I'm going to give you, in this situation, this is how we handle something. And for these, micro transactions, how you pass off a twist, what we do on double teams, what you do with this specific little look, and then you can fit it into the larger picture. So when we inevitably get to a situation you haven't covered or have to make an adjustment, like you mentioned, Dominique, in the middle of a game, you've got these things to fall back on that you've drilled over and over again in training camp that are second nature to you by that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the best way to go about it. But what really helps is having Reggie White.
Yes. At the end of the day,
have Reggie White, Ray Lewis, or Ed Reed.
Yeah. At some point, if your player is just better than my player and I can get your guy singled up, we're going to win 10 out of 10 times. All right, enough of the serious stuff. Let me ask you this. Based off the Austin Rivers comment about football players to the NBA to the NFL, forget that. Of the two sports, NBA, NFL, who do you think has more players that could make it in any other professional sport? Any other professional sport, whether it be soccer, whether it be NBA, whether it be baseball, which sport could produce more pros?
I hate to turn my back on my football guys again, but I think it's the NBA guys. Because there is a level of hand-eye coordination that all basketball players have, that only some football players have. And while being really tall is not an advantage at every sport, I think a lot of guards, like whatever connections that Kyrie has from his brain to his arms and legs, is better than anything I've seen anywhere else. And I feel like if you gave him a soccer ball, he would have figured that out. If you give him a baseball bat, he's going to crank a couple out of there. Like, that's the thing. And the football players, there are a lot of I think the way that I described it on my show is I think that there are a lot of blue collar workers in football where they are not surgeons. They aren't technicians. They are athletes. They're really big, really strong, and really fast. And then I remember we had a really good defensive end when I was in college, and he couldn't throw a football. He couldn't throw a football, but he was strong and fast and big. And I don't think that there's anybody like that in basketball. Like, not in modern basketball. Maybe back in the day when Charles Oakley was in the league and there were guys who actually couldn't shoot and couldn't dribble that well. They're all gone, and it's an international sport. So the pool of players that they're culling through to find the best athletes is even bigger. We just got American guys here, American guys that are too short to hoop. That's who plays in NFL. I'm sorry. I hate to break it to us, but it's true.
I think you're right.
No,
you're right.
It's probably true, but it hurts to hear right now. And so now that you've heard our feelings and betrayed football altogether, I think that's the perfect time to end this interview. So thank you, Domonique Foxworth, as always, for making us smarter and then somehow making me feel bad at the very end about being a blue-collar worker in the middle of this machine.
And
sorry, buddy, but I mean, blue-collar workers are needed. Like, somebody got to do all these things that the surgeons can't do. Like, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. I'm right down there with you in the trenches. We out here mining coal together, my brother. Mine that coal. And it's not glorious, but it's worthwhile.
We are the
future bald brother in arms,
NFL.
Domonique Foxworth.
Come on, fight back, hairline. Fight back.
Oh, man. I'm sorry you guys have to deal with that. I really am.
There really is no more existential crisis in a man's life than when he's trying to gauge how much time he has left with the hair on top of his head before it just starts to steadily migrate to the hair on the bottom of his face. But that is what my friend Domonique Foxworth is faced with right now, and I stand with him during these trying times. Dad, I don't want to hear a word from you. Not one.
Not saying a thing. It's something that I'm not going to have to deal with, but I think it is a real question. When do you decide, enough is enough and get rid of the whole thing? I would imagine that is a difficult decision as you're trying to hang on, knowing that you're fighting a losing battle. It's just to decide when you throw in the towel.
I think that really is the toughest part, Claudia, is knowing eventually this is going to go away. And for Dominique and my battles were different. The hairline wasn't the issue for me. It was the fact that the part filling in looked like a bad golf fairway.
Get a toupee. Toupees are in now. No,
what?
Toupees are in.
What?
I follow this girl, Toupee Queen, on Instagram. Yeah, I got my hair done here at DraftKings. Me and the girl were talking about it. Guys get toupees, and the before and after, like, these dudes go from stalker to daddy in 2 seconds with the toupee. So, GoJo, you should think about it.
At GoJo and Golic on Twitter. Are toupees in right now?
Yes.
Question mark.
They are.
What? What?
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Vic Fangio catching some heat from his former team. He's now with the Eagles as a DC, formerly with the Dolphins. Safety Javon Holland called it a complete 180 now that they brought in DC Anthony Weaver in place of Vic Fangio. And he's not the first. Tyreek Hill had some words to say about it as well. And he was asked, has he been in the player? Is it because he has been in the player's shoes? And he said, quote, I just think it's the fact that he's a good person that makes a difference, saying that about Anthony Weaver. So again, going back to the fact that maybe Vic Fangio wasn't. GoJo, Vic Fangio has hopped around a few different teams. Does something like this as a player, and curious to see, Senior, what you say too, does this raise red flags? And are you curious as to why he keeps getting jobs if this has been an issue?
No, like I think, and this really, the situation with Vic leaving Miami, I think there were some family things and reasons why he wanted to get closer to home up in the Northeast and things like that. But Dad, I don't know. I didn't get to hear the actual audio of this because it's one of those things where he could have just been truly being complimentary of Anthony Weaver and not necessarily shading Vic Fangio. But regardless, and we talk about this all the time, in a locker room as big as a football locker room, you're never going to get consensus on a coach. Some guys are going to like the guy, some guys are going to hate the guy, and that's just kind of the way it goes here. The bottom line is Vic's been pretty productive, and until now, where we're seeing, we talked about with Domonique, Mike McDonald's defense kind of become the one that's more in vogue around the league than Anthony Weaver would be a part of. Vic Fangio's defense and a lot of the tenets of what he's done had been the thing that had spread around the NFL and spawned a lot of copycats. So it's been productive, and Vic Fangio is someone that people trust. And so that's what you look at as a player is what's this coach's track record with helping guys be successful and creating productive defense, and Vic's been able to do that.
So Ron Jaworski is a friend of Vic Fangio's, and Ron Jaworski had something to say about this when these comments were made. Ron said there were some players on that defense that didn't want to work, didn't want to put the time in, didn't want to put the effort in, didn't want to make the commitment to be successful. So, Claudia, to answer your question, it's not going to be a red flag because you're playing the defense on a field. I think this has more to do with the personality of the coach that you're dealing with. And if we want to sit there and say generational, Anthony Weaver is a younger guy. Vic Fangio is 65 years old. Now, There are some older coaches that deal well with the younger generation. Pete Carroll does. Andy Reid certainly does. And there are some that just their ways just don't kind of jive with what the younger generation feels. So you have kind of a butting of the heads of personalities. It doesn't mean you don't like the defense. It means you may not like the person calling the defense. So that to me, and you put that aside, you're not best friends with people out there. We have to remember this is a work situation. So you may not like everybody you work with, but what you do, there are teammates. I've said this all along. I've used this line way too many times. 53 guys aren't singing Kumbaya in the locker room. There are guys in the locker room that I didn't like and didn't like me, but when you're on the field, you play as a team for one another. Doesn't mean you hang out afterward. You can not like the person calling the plays or who the head coach is or calling your defense or your positional coach. But on the field, you do it as one. So I think this is more the situation because those comments are directly, to me anyway, that's what I'm taking, Mike, are directly about the person and the personality of the coach, the coaches we're talking about here. So I've had coaches that I didn't really like, and maybe they didn't like me or didn't get along with them, but it doesn't matter when you're sitting in the meeting. You know what? But today, this again is something that I'm not used to, is players express that today. Players have an outlet to express it, but they will express it. Players back when I was playing, there was plenty of this, but you didn't really hear about it. It was talked about in the locker room, but you never read about it in the papers or nobody was going on the news talking about it, which was really the two ways you could do it. It was going to be in the paper or it was going to be if someone stuck a microphone in front of your face. Now, guys can say their own thing on Twitter and they're cool. And I understand that. Like
he said this in front of a microphone, though. He said this in front of a microphone, and I don't think he was saying it overtly about him.
Right. I guess that's my overall point is this generation has no problem saying things publicly, whether it's in front of a microphone, whether it's on Twitter, however they do it. I'm just saying that we've had this discussion when we talked about the Drew Brees thing in the locker room and teammates tweeting stuff about stuff in the locker room. And you did kind of clue me into this is the way this generation kind of communicates. They have no problem saying it, and that's cool. I'm saying I need to understand that. And I don't necessarily agree with it all the time, but I understand it, that there is more openness with players today in getting their feelings out in front of a microphone or on Twitter or on social media.
I guess I'm just saying, going back to this particular instance, I don't think this was really that. Like, I don't think this is as pointed an attack at Vic Fangio as people want to read into it as. It's just a guy who I think was also being complimentary of Anthony Weaver. And maybe it was because he thinks Anthony Weaver is a better hang overall than the guy that he had in the chair before that. That's fine. But I don't know. At the end of the day, I just didn't see this as inflammatory as most everyone else wanted it to see, mostly because, again, everyone's going to feel differently about these guys. And you're right. This generation, you do have to reach a little bit differently in some ways. But, you know, either way, both changed up now, Dad. We've got a whole group of new coordinators around the NFL. Are there any in particular that you're excited to see in their new spot this year? There was, when I went and looked this up yesterday, a lot more new coordinators around the NFL than I had realized going into this season with their new teams.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot. It's like when you become if you're a first-time coordinator or you're just switching teams, how do you fit in? I know Mike McDonald, you know, where he's going, it's not as obviously, you know, as a coordinator, but what he brings. Because a lot of times when a head coach also calls the plays on offense or on defense, they're kind of really the coordinator, right? So you want to see how they're going to change things up. So that's kind of and then you look at the tree. you look at who are they a tree of, and we see a lot of the Sean McVay tree. So I'm always interested where guys of those branches of that tree, where they go and how they try and implement that offense. Because remember, there's the kind of the connecting tissue of trying to implement the offense you want to go along with the talent that you have. And sometimes, it's like putting a round peg in a square hole. It doesn't fit. So it takes time to try and get the players that you want. And in the meantime, how do you implement that? How do you work it? So if your system doesn't fully fit the players that you have, how do you adjust it to make it work until over time, maybe you get more of the players that you want?
Yeah, I think in that regard, too, it's a couple of the guys I'm most interested are a part of that coaching tree. Here, we mentioned a lot Zach Robinson in Atlanta, who came over, was the quarterback's coach and passing coordinator with the Rams. And we know with a lot of these Rams guys, you're not calling the plays because Sean's there. So how is Zach going to do that in an environment where you've got the quarterback in Kirk Cousins that, as far as the Shanahan-McVay tree, especially on the Shanahan side, has always been the one that's sort of been Kyle's golden goose off in the distance. And so along with an offense there that with Arthur Smith did some similar things, I think has the pieces to do that. The other one that's a little more interesting to me is in the same division, Dad, with the Buccaneers. Liam Cohen's a guy, ever since I got to call his game Will Levis's junior year, the year that he really popped off at Kentucky. Liam Cohen was the offensive coordinator. He went back and forth really for like 4 years between working on that Ram staff under McVay and then working as the offensive coordinator at Kentucky. Runs a lot of that same stuff, and getting to meet with him in the lead up to that game always struck me as a guy who I thought eventually was going to be head coaching material. He walks into a place with Baker Mayfield and a Bucs offense that traditionally, even last year under Dave Canales, not been part of that tree. And so them making a little bit more of a decided shift in philosophy with a guy that I think is really talented at the helm and a quarterback who had a career resurgence under Dave Canales last year is really going to be an interesting blend of what you just talked about.
So names for me, Arthur Smith would be one right at the top to see what he's going to do with Russell Wilson and with Justin Fields. And then I go to Philadelphia. Kellen Moore, now the OC, and Vic Fangio, who we were just talking about, the D coordinator, just for the fact that it's the third set of OC and DC in 3 years for a team that is not very far removed from being in the Super Bowl, of how they all adjust yet again to new coordinators.
And last time around, it was because their coordinators had gotten poached by other teams for doing well. This time around, it's changes that you had to make because things went poorly last year. Can Philadelphia meet somewhere in the middle and regain that 2022 form? One of the biggest questions heading into this season.
hour 2 of GoJo and Golic. And guys, I've been a guy's girl long enough to know if you put 2 or more dudes in a room and give them enough time, they'll just start talking ball. And they will go back to years and years. It's the age-old debate. Who could be the super team? Who was the best super team? Could this year's best squad beat that year's best squad? Well, now we give all of these elite players of the past and present microphones, so they get to do it in real time and we get to listen, and it is entertaining. So Shaq had Draymond Green on his podcast, the big podcast with Shaq, and they did just that. Shaq asked with the prime Lakers and Warriors who would win in the best of 7. He also asked what the defending matchups would look like. Here's what Draymond said.
Shaq's Lakers against your Golden State Warriors. Who wins? And the bonus question, who the guard me? Please don't say Andrew Bogut.
There were defensive schemes that we could have thrown at you to affect you. One is not letting you get the ball.
How you going to do that?
So we're going to guard you with a guy in front of you, the guy behind you.
They did that.
Yeah, I wasn't on the court, though.
Bogut going to be in foul trouble. Now who your backup center?
Me.
Draymond, stop. Who guarding Kobe?
Clay.
The palpable disgust on Shaq's face during this entire conversation. If you didn't watch the video, it's so worth going to see it, because every step of the way when Draymond's going, he's just dead. The thing that stuck out to me about this, outside of Shaq's facial reaction, because Claudia's right, there's no way to actually prove who would have been right in all this, except the one thing at the core of this. Every step of the way is Draymond made abundantly clear. Draymond, who is dripping with as much bravado as any player in NBA history, made abundantly clear that no one, not him or anyone else, was checking Shaq one-on-one. Like, there was a absolute respect for the barrier that existed between saying his team could win and saying that any of them one-on-one would even have a chance of stopping the steamroller that was Shaquille O'Neal.
Which is actually refreshing to hear, because whenever you get into these generational conversations, there's no winner or loser. It's just end up being who can argue a better point or yell louder, especially in today's media. So I was refreshed to hear that, because normally you'd never admit it. You would hear a guy say, "Oh, I'd handle you." When the talk of, "Oh, if the vintage Bulls played, the dynasty of the Bulls played the last dynasty we had here of Golden State, who would win?" And somebody would be able to all of a sudden be able to be good enough to check Michael Jordan, when you know that's not happening. These are our talk radio fodder, because there is no winner or loser. It's just a lot of, "Oh, I could have handled you," or "I could have handled you," or "we would have been better," or "we would have smoked you, we'd have done this." So it was refreshing for Draymond to admit, we ain't covering you one-on-one. That's just not happening.
Well, and it's like you're right. Like, the fact that in the midst of all this, Dad, I remember when we went on a family trip to Africa, and we went on a safari, and at one point we saw these 2 female lionesses that had gone and killed like a wild animal, and they were eating it together. And we saw this whole group. There were 2 different clans of hyenas that all started coming up around and yipping and yapping. But we noticed, especially because there were 2 of the lionesses there, they kept a certain perimeter. There was a certain limit to where and how far they were willing to go until they were let in and it was their turn. That was how it felt in this conversation, where Draymond was going to go right up to it and say, "Oh, we'd have done this stuff, we'd have beat you guys, yada, yada." But he was never going to go that step too far, because he knew in his heart of hearts, there is no way in hell me, Andrew Bogut, or anybody else on that team was going to go and step up and be able to check Shaq one-on-one. So I do think it is funny that every once in a while we find that kernel of truth in these conversations that are all based on hypotheticals. And Shaq, who, like, you're talking about Michael Jordan, Shaq in the early 2000s Lakers are like Paul Bunyan for me. They're like mythical figures. The three-peat teams in the early 2000s and what they were able to do, just freakish. And Shaq, the thing that we do with Shaq, because in the big man conversations that we want to have, which is separate from the greatest player of all time, is we just give them cute labels like, "Oh, Tim Duncan," who is absolutely someone who should be considered in the bigs conversation. We just say he's the best power forward of all time. And for Shaq, we say, well, he was the most dominant player of all time, as an excuse to get out of having those meaningful conversations. But Shaq really was a freight train from hell. And so in my mind, it's like, of course no one's able to stop him. He was a mutant.
Yeah, I mean, you have to know when to cut bait and tell the truth on this one, because you're right. Whether it's whatever sport, can this generational team beat that generational team? When it's like, okay, if the Bulls are playing Golden State, whose rules you're playing by? You're playing by, the 90s rules, you're playing by, the 5 years ago rules. How you playing? Because if you're playing by the rules of today, half the Bulls team is going to foul out. If you're playing by the rules, of the Bulls time, then a lot of Golden State players are going to get knocked around. There's no winners or losers in this. That's what makes it fun to talk about. I guess fun for a while. At some point, it just becomes redundant because you have no idea what would actually happen out there.
All right, well, let's talk about the real basketball then coming up tonight, Claudia. Game 2 for the Boston Celtics. Should we already pencil it in for a Celtics loss, considering that seems to be the trend they've formed this postseason?
Yeah, they've dropped every game 2 so far, but that's not what the market's saying, Gojo. They opened as 8.5-point favorites, moved to 9, so they are favored in this game. And I think we have to talk about what we talked about after that game 1 and the stats that stood out, specifically Drew Holiday dropping 28, Tatum 36, Brown 26, and the Pacers having 21 turnovers. And the fact that the Pacers, a lot of people said, won that game up until those 10 seconds. So you would think if they can limit the turnovers, and Drew Holiday hasn't been very consistent in dropping that many points, helpful in other ways. I look at this line and I'm still tempted to take the points like I was in that first game, and they were 10-point favorites, and no, they did not cover. So game 2 in general is not good for them. Trends aren't predictive. We do have a small sample size, but I think just based off what we saw in game 1, if the Pacers can clean up some of those turnovers, they could keep this game close, and yeah, they could win outright, Gojo.
Yeah, and I think this is a lot, Dad, the feeling like what we saw in the Knicks-Pacers series, where the games were always really close, and even games the Pacers lost, you looked at in Madison Square Garden and went, all right, they didn't look overwhelmed by this situation. It was close, and so you could see the signs that they had the ability to win that series, and I think the same thing comes from that Boston series. I understand Game 1, a lot of people coming off it wondered, hey, does missing a great shot like that to steal a game on the road against a team like Boston do something to your psyche? I think if you're in that locker room, it should give you a lot of confidence that, oh no, we're capable of going out there and winning because we went out. The mistakes that we made in critical moments down the stretch, things that are easily correctable, not just a skill issue, are the things that undermined us and cost us that game. So I would absolutely take Indiana and the points in this game, Dad. I understand it's a small sample size, but this Boston team has shown they can take their eyes off the prize at certain times. And this Indiana team that's got an unrelenting pace that has been the consistent through line for them, combined with what they showed in game 1, I think absolutely puts them in a position to win.
No, I'm absolutely taking the Pacers in this one, without question. Listen, in the first 2 rounds, they lost game 1, so it's not like they're not used to the position they've been in. They've done it twice already. But this is a game they could have and should have walked away with, but they didn't. Bottom line is they're down 1 game. We talk about confidence. At this point, if you're in the finals, a conference finals, if you don't have the confidence at this point, so to sit there, as far as I'm concerned, to sit there and say, well, the Pacers should have a lot more confidence now. Believe me, they had plenty of confidence going into it. They've gotten all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. So I'm not worried about the confidence level. I'm worried about the mistakes. I'm worried about the turnovers. I'm worried about that, Mike, as you know, when you're on the sideline and when you're in a game and you see things start to stockpile a little bit, that kind of gets to you mentally. Not your confidence, but like, oh, God, here we go again with the turnovers. Are we going to fall down that road again? This team absolutely has the ability. And I said they would win 1 in Boston, or at least I predicted they would. They almost pulled it off in 1, so I'm going to say they pull it off tonight. But I'll easily take the points in this one.
Yeah, I think, Dad, to your point about the turnovers, like we did this a lot with the Golden State Warriors dynasty we talked about, where their style of play was one that didn't value the basketball, but their output was such that they could overcome that until they weren't able to anymore. With this team and the Pacers, the pace that they play at, the ball movement that's the hallmark of their offense, I'm sure is going to lead to some of that. To me, it's about minimizing damage and the impact of that in critical moments like we saw, the set pieces coming down the stretch, simple things like handling the ball coming up court against the one-on-one defense are the things that I do think are correctable, even if their style of play is probably going to still lead to them putting the balls in harm's way more often than some of their peers and opponents. So we'll see on the other side. We're rocking with the Pacers in game 2 to see if they can even the series before it heads back to Indiana. Coming up next, we think toupees are back, but apparently Slim Thick is also on the menu in 2024. Next. All right, guys, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of the day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. If you miss us there, you can catch the best of GoJo and Golic noon to 1 p.m. Eastern, wherever you hear VSiN on the radio. And if you miss us there too, God help you, or any of our great guests like Domonique Foxworth from the Dominique Foxworth Show over at ESPN, make sure you check that out wherever you get your podcasts or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show. And guys, let's start off with this. We do a lot of travel mishaps on this show because we're real flyers, and we've talked a lot about charter flights lately and some of the dangers of flying commercial. A college golf team found out one of those dangers recently on their way to the NCAA championships here. This is the East Tennessee State University golf team that was on their way to the NCAAs when one of the players on their team tweeted a horrifying video of them watching Delta employees checking out the bags from under the plane, tossing the bags full of their clubs on the ground, which, Dad, you know what? Like, I'm not going to judge too hard because I understand these guys are dealing with volume overall, but it's a difference of a weekend warrior even who's on his way to Vegas with his buddies to golf, and these guys who are watching the tools to try and go and secure their future at this golf championship getting just ragdolled.
So it's one of those, do you want to see the sausage being made, right? Do you want to see the inner workings of something? Do you want to see this, or you just want to go to the bag carousel and see your bag come out and hope it's good? But I think this is good to do because obviously Delta is seeing this. Obviously Delta is seeing their employees just hoist these bags. So I do believe something good can come from this, like a note from Delta to their employees. Hey, you're out publicly. Everybody can see you, and you're just throwing their crap around like you don't even give two damns about it, which they probably don't. They're just doing their job. But I do see some good that can come from this because it's being publicly they're being publicly flogged for it.
Senior, even if they get in trouble, they don't give a damn. They're like, really?
I know
Fire
they don't.
me.
I know.
Find somebody else.
I know. All right, well, then so be it. But, they got to do something, right?
You're right.
Delta
You would think.
See a video like that and not at least try and do something, right?
I don't know if my algorithm popped this up on X for me, but there was ones from another airline to where the guys were literally throwing it up and throwing it down as jokes, like, haha. One guy threw it off and it completely missed the conveyor belt. So every time we're thinking, like, how did my suitcase get so jammed up, or how did my suitcase get lost? It's almost like these guys are doing it on purpose. So I can't imagine. Golf clubs are not cheap, and I'm sure they had really nice ones, so that would be terrifying for me.
I just always assume that most of my stuff there is going through perilous. That's why I'm a big hard shell suitcase guy for a check bag, getting it up there. Oh, the Delta response here. Yeah, that's not surprising. You know what? Honestly, the way I view this is like, those guys, it's probably not a job that pays you a ton of money. It's pretty hard labor. You're out there in some conditions where you're usually cold. And that, I treat this like I'm always the person. I'll never send a food dish back to the kitchen at a restaurant. I've got too much Midwest open me, where even if it's the wrong order, I'm just like, all right, well, they tried and I'll make do with it. Because I feel like, and I've seen waiting enough to know, if you send it back, you're probably upping the chance of it getting spit on or messed with. And I feel like telling these employees now to stop doing this with the bag just means they're going to hide it from view and then DDT your bag or rock bottom the thing now, given the opportunity.
I would hope not.
Yeah, but that's what they would do. Once they take the cart underneath where nobody can see them anymore, that's when they're going to start to do damage to your stuff.
GoJo, if somebody brings you a whole ass meal that is not the one you ordered, you're not going to say, hey, I didn't order this?
I have legitimately eaten a meal that I did not order for that reason, because I don't feel like waiting, because if the meal they brought me is like good looking too, then I don't want to deal with the wait time there. But it's also like, they tried, like, they didn't get it right this time, but I don't want them to feel bad. They made a good meal still. It's just the wrong meal. So, speaking of someone who has enjoyed different meals as of late, Claudia, let's get to that. DJ Burns, our thick king from March Madness this year on the men's side, showing up a little bit slimmer as he tries to make the jump.
Real slim. He lost 45 pounds over 6 weeks. He says it's not because of Ozempic. He said it's following NBA draft workouts. He's doing cardio in the morning, of course, lifting according to the draft workouts. And yeah, man, he looks good. This is scary because he could move. He could boogie even as big as he was. I can't imagine how he can move now with all that weight off.
So, Mike, this brings up a question that I've always wondered is, here we see a basketball player, but I look at football. O-linemen in college football, how big they are. D-linemen, especially the interior guys, how big they are. Then all of a sudden, they're getting ready for the combine or their pro day for the NFL, and they all trim up. Why aren't you doing that then in college? If you're going to do that to play at the top level, the NFL, so you're getting yourself in what you believe is the best shape, and that actually means you're dropping 10, 20, 30 pounds, why isn't that being done in college? It seems in college, they're bulking you up just so when you go to the next level, they're trimming you back down.
Yeah, each level has different goals. You can tailor it more individually when you're making the jump to the next level than in college, where it's more of a big box approach. And your body's your job now at that level. In college, while we've called it a job, you still have to worry about going to class. I can remember being an athlete and having to, as soon as we got done with practice, because back then we didn't have training table, get on my bike and try and haul ass across campus to get to the dining hall before it closed, and then try and get over to study hall after that. So you're not operating in an environment that's necessarily always conducive to that. Now is a little bit different case. I think a lot of these athletic departments approach this with a more professional lens than happened back in 2008. But part of it was you were making do with a schedule that didn't always put this at the forefront.
I guess more my point was, and you would know this better than me, way back when I was in college, were these strength and conditioning coaches in college, are they, for the big men, are they promoting get bigger, gain more weight? That's more my point.
It depends. Each has a different approach. Like my first strength coach at Notre Dame wanted us to be huge. When our second strength coach with Brian Kelly's staff got there, they wanted us to lean out, lower body fat. We were going to run a faster offense. So I think everyone's got different goals that can vary based on what your goals as a program are. And I do think now we've got more people that are thinking about that in a different way. I love DJ Burns, though. Someone asked him about any weight loss tips, and he said simply, work out more, eat less, stay at home. Yeah. Simple words to abide by, and a formula that's not going to change much over time. Claudia, let's get to the third, though. Some big news as we were just coming off of one NFL draft about an upcoming NFL draft as this thing continues to barnstorm.
Yeah, it'll be, drum roll, in Pittsburgh. Woo! First time the city will host the draft since the event moved out of New York in 2015. Steelers team president and CEO Art Rooney said the plan is to stage the draft outside. He expects crowds between the Steelers' home stadium and PNC Park down the street. I have never been to Pittsburgh, so I can't speak much on this. And Senior, I will divert to you.
It's a good area to have a lot of people. It's a good area. I do like where they're going to have it. It is really, and there's going to be a lot of people. This next year, it's in Green Bay. You know, there'll be a ton of people. We just came off Detroit with over 750,000 fans at that. This, Mike, is one of the better ideas, one of the best ideas the NFL has had, is to barnstorm this. I know they've been talking about doing it possibly with a combine. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen. I think everybody likes the continuity of just having it right in Indy for the simplicity of it. But I think moving this draft around, it's been a hit everywhere. And that this is one of the best things. I think it's fantastic. They're going to keep doing it because it's working. And it worked in Detroit. It's going to work in Green Bay. It's going to work in Pittsburgh. It's going to work pretty much wherever they're going to go.
It's a good way to satisfy cities that they don't want to put cold Super Bowls in, which I am someone that fully endorses. And Pittsburgh's an awesome sports town. Like, again, I got to spend a little bit of time there as a rookie going through training camp. It's an awesome city. They live and die with those teams out there. Carson Street's a ton of fun down there going out. But the area where they're going to have it by the football stadium, even by PNC, beautiful park you can see coming across the bridges. There's tons of great views there. And everyone while they're in town should take the opportunity to see one of those freestanding Pittsburgh toilets that are in the basement of a lot of the traditional homes out there. A lot of the local culture to drink in. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google Pittsburgh toilet when we get done with this show and enjoy the images that follow there, because they're very, very unique, and a freestanding toilet and concrete in the basement is always something I'm going to love to point out. We hope you enjoyed pointing that out with us here on the show. If you did, or enjoyed the orgasmic joy I enjoyed with the McDonald's ice cream, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review this podcast. Leave it a 5-star rating. Thanks so much. Let this image haunt your dreams. We'll talk to you tomorrow.